Hi, book club. Welcome back. Today we are going to be discussing the Into Darkness trilogy, most specifically the third book in the Into Darkness trilogy, which is Game On by Navessa Allen. This book will be published on March 31st, 2026, and this was an ARC, so thank you to Zando Publishing and NetGalley for the opportunity to get to review this book. I do want to start off this video and be very transparent that I did DNF this book around chapter 9. So all the opinions I formed and my rating is solely based off of how far I read into Game On. Starting off in December of 2024, I did read Lights Out on the Libby app. I experienced it in its audiobook format, and it was one of my top reads for 2024 and still is one of my top reads. I love this book. I did also read Caught Up in its audiobook format, and this one really fell off for me and I just did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the first one. With that being said, I will not be comparing the third book in this trilogy to the first one or the second one. However, I will still be reviewing it in the same mindset that it is a part of this trilogy. I went into this really excited because, like I said, I requested it on NetGalley and was shocked that within a couple days I got approved. And on top of that, I love this genre. I love dark romance. I love a morally gray man. I love the tension. I love banter. Like, that is my thing. And unfortunately, this just did not hit in the way that I was hoping it would. The biggest thing for me was honestly the dynamic between the two main characters. I'm someone who loves dark romance. I love a morally gray MMC, as I already said. I love that whole I would burn the world for her mafia boss energy. But for me, this just didn't feel like that. It felt less like tension and more like just pure hostility. The way that MMC spoke to the FMC at times just felt more verbally aggressive than compelling, and I just personally had a really hard time buying into that as a romantic foundation between the two of them. To add to that, the MMC comments on her body multiple times just in a way that really did not sit right with me. The book explains that our FMC's rail thin frame is connected to her chronic illness, which is gastritis, which the author does share in the author notes. There is a moment where they're at a restaurant and the MMC looks at her and tells her she looks like she needs to eat, and she lies and said she already did at home because she has gastritis, and the MMC just responds with like sure. And I get at this point that he is not aware of her chronic illness. Like, I understand that he doesn't know that at this point, but for me, those comments just did not come across as concerned. They just felt really off, and personally for me, that kind of dynamic just made it even harder for me to see any kind of romantic appeal between the characters. In addition to all of this, another thing that just did not really land for me was the banter. I feel like in dark romance books like this, the banter is what makes everything work, and it's what gives you that chemistry. But here it just kind of felt like flat or one-sided, and it didn't really feel playful or sharp. It just felt very abrasive, in my opinion, which also made it really hard for me to stay invested in this story. I also noticed there was a lot of very current TikTok-y style phrasing woven into the dialogue and also the internal monologue of some of the characters. For example, our FMC mentions the one TikTok trend, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes, that whole one. Our FMC also calls attention to a very familiar romance trope when calling out her counterpart being a blonde male. And there are moments where it feels self-aware of that, almost kind of poking fun at it. But for me, that self-awareness didn't really add anything to the character. It just made me more aware that we were still leaning into that same archetype. So rather than feeling intentional, it ended up reading more like a justification for having the same character archetype, which truly pulled me out of the story on top of everything else. So with all of that being said, I did end up DNFing this book around chapter 9, and just based on my experience, I would probably give it around a 2-star rating. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt since I did not finish it. However, I do think my rating does reflect my reading experience. Now, with all of that being said, I do think that if you enjoy darker, more abrasive dynamics, intense character interactions, and very trend-forward dialogue, then you might have a different experience with this book than I did. That is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad you're here. Don't forget you can find me on my other socials at bookshookslooks, and the link to my link tree is in my YouTube bio and down in the description. I will see you guys in the next one. Toodaloo!